right now, David. Oh, that must have been. He's very funny. Yeah, that must have been Keith. So what's going on? Well, sorry, I didn't mean to get you confused. Yeah, I get it.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 12th, 2024 Planning Board meeting. I'd like to start off the meeting with the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. To the republic for which it stands, a few announcements. The emergency exits are to your left and right, and also out the back, as are the restrooms to the left. Please be sure to sign the attendance sheet if you haven't yet, and they're on the table in the back of the room. There are business cards in the back table also, in case you need contact information, emails, phone numbers for the planning department, if you have questions going forward here. Also on the back table are a copy of any resolutions that we are entertaining this evening. Please silence your cell phones or turn them off so you don't interrupt those who wish to address the board on tonight's agenda. And take all the conversations that you feel you need to have out into the hallway and close the doors behind you so you don't interrupt those speaking this evening. So with that, we have meeting minutes. Nope, no meeting minutes. I didn't think so. And correspondence. Okay. There's a number of items of correspondence in front of us. On the 9/19/2023 from Mr. and Mrs. Shea. Also from Mr. and Mrs. Genthner. Jesse Gregorio, Michael Richards, Debbie Russell, Marcia Senges, Betsy Warner, Marcia Senges, and Marcia Senges. There's three of them in here, so that's regarding 7200 Rawson Road. To address the Norbert Solar Farm, a letter from Van Voorhees and a letter from Bartel. And next item would be the town board update, and I'd like to welcome Alexis Ogra, thank you, sorry. Like to say hi and anything you want to bring before the board?
Sure. So, as many of you may or may not know, I recently was elected to the town board back in November, took office in January, and Ed Kohovic, who's previous on the board, I was very sad to see him retire, but he's quite enjoying his retirement. He's traveling all over, and Dave Condon is typically the liaison for the meetings, I think, from January till end of March. He is out of town, so unfortunately wasn't able to make it. I know that Drew Kuzmano is going to be watching from home on the live YouTube, and then I decided to come in person. So if you guys have any questions for me, I'm happy to take them.
Well, welcome. It's
Absolutely.
nice to meet you finally, and
Yes.
appreciate your presence here this evening. And I don't know if the board have any questions or comments? Okay, great.
Wonderful.
So we're all
Thank you.
set. Thank you.
Take care.
Keith, update for the next meeting?
Keith Maynard, project manager for the town of Victor. So your next regularly scheduled meeting for Tuesday, March 26th is canceled, as we discussed in the last meeting, due to the early voting for the presidential primary. So based on that, your next actual meeting is Tuesday, April 9th at 7 p.m. On the agenda for that is Rivian charging stations, 200 High Point Drive. Applicant is requesting approval to install 6 initial charge posts, L2 charge posts, and future charge posts and associated utility equipment. They're on your agenda for tonight too, but because they have to go to the county, they will be carried over. We know that. And then the second item on the agenda for the 9th is Bluestone Trail, which was formerly known as 7200 Rawson Road. Applicant is requesting acknowledgement of a complete application for a 59 for-sale townhome unit subdivision on 18.5 acres. Project will consist of 2 private roads off the north side of Rawson Road. And this is their sketch plan application, and this is the first step in a 3-step major subdivision. And this is a separate planning board action from the minor subdivision that is on your agenda before you tonight, plus any other carryovers from tonight. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Keith. We have 4 items on the agenda this evening. The first 3 are public hearings. The second one, the Norbert Solar Farm. I need to recuse myself as the company I work for has done work for and is currently doing work for Norbert, so Joe Limbeck will be taking the lead on that application. So first one up, however, is the Rivian charging stations, 200 High Point Drive. The applicant's requesting approval to install 6 initial charge posts, 1 L2 charge post, 6 future charge posts, and associated utility equipment. So, someone here that's presenting for that?
Hello, Alec Wiseman with Rivian Automotive. We're going through the planning and permitting process right now. I believe there's some correspondence back and forth with our designers of record. But as you stated, our goal here is to install 6 initial fast charging stations with 6 additional coming in the future and an L2 station. So I'm here to answer any questions.
So if you could discuss the layout on the current parking lot, which is opposite Starbucks.
Correct. So I'll start with the northeast corner.
There's maybe a laser pointer there in front of you too, if you'd like to use it.
There we go. So northeast corner here is where the transformer and all the electrical equipment will be situated. We'll be building the initial 6 in these first 6 stalls down here to the south, and the 6th expansion will be continued up to where our equipment sits. The single L2 will sit right here. We're also proposing to add a trailer length stall, so anyone towing a trailer would be able to charge as well without having to unhitch. So there is a modification of this landscaping island that's shown on our plans.
Can you define an L2 charge post?
Correct. L2 is slower charging, so it's at 240 or 208 volt if it's 3-phase, as opposed to DC fast charging. And so it's a matter of time. Someone who's perhaps dropping their car off before work and plans to stay a little bit longer can drop their car off and utilize it.
So there's one single
One
parking
single.
spot proposed.
Correct.
Okay. Susie, do we have the site plan? There we go. Okay, you can describe a little bit more in detail what's going on too.
Absolutely. So let me see where it died, or it's dim. Yeah. But as I stated on the
You got another one if you want to use it.
As mentioned earlier, up here in the northeast, we have the transformer. That's the large box on the left, feeding into our switchgear, which then feeds 6 power cabinets. This is where 480 volt 3-phase AC power gets converted to 1000 volt DC output, which is fed to our 11 charging stations here, and then our 1 trailer stall. So this group here are all of the fast chargers. And then within the switchgear is also a step-down transformer to 208 volt 3-phase. And that's what feeds our single level 2 charger right here. We do propose relocating an existing light. The lot as is has some lighting that's existing. We're just revising the spacing very minimally. And that's about it. Landscaping is minimal to match existing, and to landscape at any disturbed areas. But most of the work, as you can see, is behind the curb, with the exception being the modification to this island here.
Okay, I guess I'll open up to the board. Joe?
So can you talk again? I'm having trouble hearing you. What vegetation is on that island in the middle?
I believe there's 3 trees currently existing, and then just the grass in between.
You're going to rip out the trees?
I believe 2 of them are currently planned to be removed.
And
Check the
you
plan.
think the third one's going to survive after ripping up the ground all around it? The roots aren't going to get sort of chewed up?
So we have our engineers looking at, and they may have already actually analyzed this, but the actual species of tree, as well as the size of the bulb, and intend to stay outside of the radius that would be impacted.
And what's the rationale between behind putting a charging station there?
We like to have our sites have trailer accessibility, so someone towing a trailer, as many of our users do, they won't need to unhitch. All of our other stalls are just 18 feet deep, and if you're driving a trailer, it's inconvenient, it gets in the way. You're blocking off other stalls in a standard stall.
What kind of trailers? I'm curious.
Campers, yard equipment, whatever people are towing. We see a lot of campers.
And they can't use the ones along the ones that you're proposing to put in?
They can, but they're pull in and back out. This is a pull through, so you're not risking jackknifing. It's just a lot more simple for users to navigate.
Both from a visual perspective and a need perspective, I think it's not the best idea.
Yep.
You're talking about using that island, losing the
Leave it
landscaping.
alone. Yeah, I think it looks fine. I think it adds to the visuals of the property, and I just don't see the need for taking it apart like that. And I don't think the existing tree is going to survive.
Okay, anything else, Joe?
I'm good, thanks.
Al?
Yeah, I would just echo Joe's comments on trying to maintain the island, even if that meant to come up with some other configuration to accommodate the trailer request. And then it would be nice to see some landscaping to shield the electrical boxes that'll be going in and
The
the
transformers?
transformers, yeah.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Okay. Scott?
I guess the question I have is, how does this impact the existing parking situation for the Starbucks and FedEx and such? Do they use this facility, and is this going to reduce their available parking?
It's not going to reduce any parking. We're utilizing existing stalls. The only modification that we're proposing is actually the addition of the trailer stall, which would be a net positive of 1 stall at the site.
I guess my question is it removing available parking for these businesses?
So these stalls are all, we call them enabled, meaning anyone can park there, preferred parking for EV chargers.
Okay.
But it's not restricted to only EV chargers.
So someone could come in and park in a charger parking space, and that's okay?
If that's their prerogative.
And is it proprietary? In other words, will this only serve this particular model of vehicle? In other words, could a Tesla pull in there and charge itself?
It's a good question. It'll be open to all EV chargers that support the North America's charging standard.
Okay. I would also just add that I agree with the prior 2 individuals in their comments.
Regarding the island, okay.
Yes.
Ernie?
I don't really have anything to add, except I know that there are adapters available now so that any vehicle can use a Tesla spot. Will this be the same for this?
That's correct. So at the time of opening, this will have the other adapter because that's currently what's more common. However, a Tesla user with an adapter could use our stall. Currently, all the non-Teslas on the market are CCS, which is what this will be. Once we open in around 2025, when all other vehicles will start to have the Tesla port inside the vehicle, we can do a cable swap in the field that is, it's about a 5-minute swap. So it'll be the other cable and anyone with an adapter can use it.
Thank you. That's all I have, Joe.
Okay, thanks, Ernie. I'll echo this comments I heard regarding the island and some landscaping around the transformers. This is a public hearing, so I'd like to open up the floor to see if anyone else has comments. Anybody wish to speak? Come step up, name, address. You can only ask a question if you come up to the microphone. But you're more than welcome to. Thanks.
Thank you. What does this do to our taxes?
I'm sorry, I need your name and
Oh,
address.
Tracy Gray,
And address.
address 8016 Main Street, Fishers.
Thank you.
What does this do to our taxes? Like, do our taxes go up because of this, or is it
Just-
just a convenience thing,
It's a
or?
privately funded charging station, like the Tesla station at the mall, the other stations that were installed as well, so, no.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
Anyone else? Okay, I guess I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move.
Al moves,
Second.
Ernie seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, public hearing's closed.
Thank you.
I don't, yeah, thanks. Okay. Yeah, the county's currently reviewing this application, so we don't have a resolution. So they will be on the next agenda, as Keith indicated, for approval. And since Wes is still here, he's got a question.
Not
Thanks.
going anywhere just yet. So
Thanks.
I just wanted to mention that Labella Town Engineer, we did provide a comment letter on the Rivian Charging Station project dated March 8th, 2024. A couple of the comments the planning board has discussed in regard to the island, tree removal. We did ask whether, we asked the applicant to confirm whether or not they needed to provide any erosion and sediment control on site, to verify that they didn't need any. We didn't see any on the plans. They're going to be relocating one of the light poles. It doesn't look like it's going to be moving too far. And then there's a plan keynote that we needed them to maybe address. We didn't see it on the plans. It indicates it was a keynote for a proposed 2-in-1 bollard, non-illuminated sign to read 20-foot maximum trailer. And I think that, so that's associated with the trailer parking. And if that goes away from the design plan, I guess we probably don't need to worry about that keynote. We also wanted the applicant to clarify whether any lighting was needed in and around the power cabinets. And then lastly, I think it would be helpful for the planning board to have some form of catalog sheet that identifies or that depicts the equipment in color, and to identify what type of illumination might be emitted from these chargers. We've got a few, I know, in Victor Crossing, the plaza there, that kind of shed some green illumination, and it would be helpful to understand whether any illumination would be coming from these charging stations. So that would be helpful. That's it. That's the extent of Labella's comments.
Yeah, thanks you for bringing those points up, Wes. Something that I think we had talked about before, but neglected to bring that up as well. So, good. Anything else? Any questions for Wes? All right, we can move on to the next application, which is the Norvitz Solar Farm, and Joe is going to take this one. I have to recuse, so.
Hey, good evening. The second item on the agenda is Norbit Solar Farm, 02-SP-2024, 1SU 2024 on Main Street, Fishers, tax map 5.00-1-70.000. 34.93 acres. Applicants requesting approval to install a 4.428 MWAC solar energy facility on 34.93 acre parcel consisting of forest and meadowland. The activity in front of us tonight is to establish lead agency for this project. There are 7 additional agencies that have an interest in this project, and the activity tonight is designed to see who actually would want to take the lead on this. And having said that, there's enough interest, and it's a big project. It's the first of its kind in our area. So would it be possible for you to talk a little bit about what it is you plan to do?
Absolutely.
Particularly some of the concerns I think might be out there in terms of noise, the view shed, glare Quickly, if you could, but give us a good thumbnail.
Sure, absolutely. So good evening, everyone. My name is James Creedicos. I'm with BME Associates. You also have Victor Cha-Cha and Sean Donahue with Norbit Solar Farms here with me as well. As you just said, our project is located on Main Street Fishers. We are actually all the way down on the county line, so the western property boundary of us is the town and Mendon County line to Monroe County. What we're looking to do is basically come into the site and install, like you mentioned, about a 4.4 megawatt solar farm. For this project site, these panels are going to be fixed tilt, so they don't rotate. They basically are always oriented facing southward to catch the sun at like a 30-degree offset or so from level. We are complying with the maximum solar height code for the town, which I believe is 12 feet for these. The site itself is really predominantly brush. There's a little bit of woods up in the northwest corner of the site, which we are looking to preserve. In terms of the site itself, there's a couple small wetlands at the upper portion of the site. Those will the two smaller ones are probably going to end up being non-jurisdictional. The larger one that's on the west side of our access drive we're going to leave alone. There's also some wetlands and perennial streams up in the northwest corner. Again, we're going to preserve the wooded area up there. That's really the only true wooded area of the site. Although it does look very vegetated, it's really just a very dense brush with some scattered trees. You have to go almost all the way to the north end of the site and get off the property or in that corner to really have the mature woods. And it really does open up there. You know, there's no low underbrush there, and you can walk through it pretty easily. What we're looking to do is come off the existing drive that's on Main Street Fishers today. Right now, it is right there, and we've got about 600 or 700 feet, and this comes up about just over 10% existing. It's a little asphalt broken gravel drive. We're going to be looking to rebuild that as well as extend that down into the center areas of the site for our site access. Once you get up about this 600 or 700 feet, that's where the site levels off, and then it's very flat, less than 5% slopes pretty much everywhere until you get up into that north corner where it starts to concentrate in some of those perennial streams and then run off site. Runoff for the site is really kind of split right down the middle. The northern half of it all makes its way up into this northwestern corner and then gets into a drainage swale and goes under the thruway. Eventually connecting with Irondequoit Creek. The rest of the runoff basically runs down the road and then eventually makes its way into these ponds and through kind of the drainage system, again, eventually getting to Irondequoit Creek. In terms of the site development, it's pretty straightforward in terms of a site construction process. We're going to basically come in, do our stabilized entrance, bring the access drive up, set up perimeter erosion controls, clear and grub the site, and then stabilize it. At that point, we'll finish building the access drive and stormwater facility and the fence, and then you basically work your way out with the solar panels. You know, constructing the back, putting the panels in, just direct post-driven stuff on the fixed racks with what a typical solar panel looks like, you know, across all of them. Perfect, thank you very much. So this is what's mounted on to the racking system itself. Obviously, these are interchangeable. If they get damaged, can be replaced. The racking system is basically just a racking material. We did get several comments from the fire marshal about fire protection, but neither the solar panels or the racking systems themselves are combustible. So the fires from those components, which is predominantly the majority of what we're building out there, are not combustible. So there is a lot less fire concern with that. Some of the other comments I know that are pretty consistent with solar projects are, you know, what about the battery systems? This site is small. It doesn't actually even have any battery storages on it. It just uses string inverters, which are going to then just take the power and put it right back into the transmission grid. So we're not storing any energy on site. You know, the same things you'd have with the electric cars burning forever and the larger batteries here. So none of those are really a concern.
I do have a question. We're talking
Sure.
about the electricity. How about connectivity to the grid? We're going to see more poles, more wires. Is it going to be buried service getting to the grid?
Sure. So all the wiring inside the solar panel field themselves is all underground buried cables. We keep it underground basically all the way down to the access drive where we need to tie into the grid. At that point, we do need to come above grade, and then we usually have like a series of about 5 or 6 poles, about 50-foot spacing. So those are going to just basically be located along the access drive. and then they'll connect into the power grid that's down along the road there. There's some
On the corner
overhead.
of Fishers Road, Main Street,
Yep.
Fishers, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Drainage-wise, it's pretty straightforward. We do have to comply with the New York State DEC general stormwater permit requirements. We, on these projects, have been using a impervious access drive. There are some provisions the DEC makes to allow for a permeable access drive. Generally, we found that the 8-inch section isn't thick enough to actually support the construction vehicles well. And then the detail for when they want you to go over a certain slope percentage, I believe it's 8 or 10, they want you to actually use some of those structural cells. And again, those are just a big headache to work with. They cause more nuisance than they're worth to just get that little bit of or pervious surface. So we treat it as impervious. We build a stormwater facility, do our practices to make sure we're complying with the quantity and quality components of that requirement. So we have a little stormwater facility that's going to basically be located kind of at the southern end of the site in this little bump out that we have, and then that's just going to detain and release water very slowly. It'll detain up to the 100-year storm event, and I think the peak flow rates were very low. I know we're using like the new CFS waiver, so we don't have any increase in that. In terms of stormwater in the site, really what we're trying to look for is to maintain sheet flow through the development. So we have level spreaders at certain locations based upon the topography. So that way any runoff that's coming off the panels has less of a chance to concentrate before it can, go through the dense metal mix that basically gets established everywhere on the site. So it is a dense metal mix that we put down. It's specific to solar panel fields, so it's got like a lot of pollinators. It's called a fuzz and buzz mix. It's a low maintenance thing. Go out there, cut it down once or twice a year, just to keep it healthy. And that's really about the extent of the on-site maintenance that we need to do besides, cleaning and then, repairs of the panels and electrical equipment if necessary.
So we're getting a little granular, if you don't mind. Could we just talk in generalities a little
Sure.
bit? Particularly, I think some of the concerns with solar fields are the view shed, for instance, and the glare. If you could touch on that, that'd be great.
Sure. So we submitted as part of the application several studies. We submitted a viewshed study, which includes a bare earth model as well as a vegetated model that's based on the National Land Cover Database. So we basically take topography of the site, model our panels at the proposed height, and then we pretend there's no vegetation anywhere, and we do a viewshed there to show, okay, here's what you could see if all the trees were cut down everywhere. And then we use the National Land Cover Database to run another model, which they basically take the wooded areas. And there's an exhibit showing you what was classified as wooded areas in that. And then we run the same analysis. And then what we do is we use that analysis when we move into the glare study, and we use that to identify key locations we're looking at for potential glare, nuisance glare. We're looking for glares to the adjacent roads, to adjacent homes. We're looking at modeling the homes at like 16-foot heights for the glare study, so you're looking out the second-story window. We're cognizant of the nearby airports, the thruway to the north of us. Basically, it shows that there's no glare associated with any of the adjacent roadways. And then there's a little bit of green and yellow glare to some of the, one of the residents as well as some of the airplane pilots. But it's a short duration thing, couple minutes a day, and then the airport's really the only thing we need to pay attention to is glare that's associated with air traffic control towers. Green and yellow glare isn't considered a nuisance for pilots, so we're not near any air traffic control towers. So we're basically pretty clear with all of those. And then in the areas where the view shed identifies visibility to the neighbors as well as potential glare, that's where we look to do our proposed screening. So we do have a row of evergreens that we're basically planting kind of along this property boundary. But even with that, on the site today as it exists, even with leaf-off conditions, a lot of the perimeter brush is so dense, and it's already probably around 20 feet high, you can't see through it even with leaf-off conditions in a lot of locations. So the site is very well screened today. The last study that you asked us to comment on quick was the noise study. So what we do is we model the noise from the inverters. Those are the only equipment on site that is generating noise for this. And we run out different dimensions and distances to the north, south, east, and west property line. And then we also included some additional location points at the two residences because they're a little bit further than the east and west locations, but they're a little closer than the north and south boundaries. Basically, that just shows at those locations or any of the property boundaries were basically consistent with what the New York State DEC considers a rural quiet area. So those are kind of the key points. We also did get comments from the town staff for what was provided, highway, code enforcement, landscaping, and what was the last one? Oh, and the fire marshal. A lot of the comments, again, were oriented toward the fire protection things, which we provided responses about 4 o'clock today, so I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read through those. And then really the only two questions else were from code enforcement with regard to the existing road grade being a little over 10%. We were just going to ask the town board and the town engineer if that's acceptable. It allows us to not have to recreate those 10% side swales and regrade that. We thought the 10.65% slope that the driveway is at today is effectively the same thing, and we're generally going up to like 12 to 15% on a lot of our other solar projects anyways for these.
Okay.
And then the other question was about some of the existing split rail fences that are located along the west side of the access drive and along this property boundary. Those are associated with the neighbor's property for animal pens. We weren't planning on touching them, even though they do encroach a little bit onto our property.
Thank you.
So that's kind of the project in a nutshell. I mean, I'd be happy to answer more questions. If you have anything on operations, the NSF team can answer.
Any questions from the board?
I guess the question I had is, who are the involved agencies besides ourselves? We're here tonight to,
So those would be the
Determine lead
New York State DEC, Ontario County Department of Public Works, New York State Department of Health, NYSERDA, Ontario County IDA, Ontario County Planning Board, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. That's why we're doing the thing to the lead agency.
I mean, I think I'll have more questions as time goes on, but I don't think
For our
it's
purposes
appropriate to
tonight.
really drill into it right now. The one thing that did kind of jump out at me is that there's a noise section in here, and I guess I didn't know that these units produce any noise.
Yeah, to the convert, I think from the AC to DC power, if I'm not mistaken, that ends up causing a little bit of noise generation. These ones are like tiny little string inverters, so there's like 30 on this one, I believe, that just get set on a rack. So they're a little bit smaller than some of the bigger units. You'll see where the sites have batteries associated with them.
Okay.
But the noise is kind of a buzz noise, and then, obviously, once you get so far away, you get the logarithmic decay of the decibel readings, so.
Well, it's a slight buzz, huh?
Yeah, but again, the noise levels that we're seeing at the analysis points are consistent with the DEC, like rural areas, so.
Ernie?
And prior applications, not in this town, but elsewhere in the country, have other agencies besides the town planning board and the lead agency?
Generally, the planning boards are the lead agencies for most of these. I don't know if, Victor, have you seen any that haven't? Yeah. Yeah, so typically the planning board or whatever board is approving the actual solar project itself at the town.
And how high are the panels going to be above land?
These ones are going to comply with the town code, so which I believe is a 12-foot max. So they're pretty close to that at the top of the tilt.
It's pretty tall.
Yeah, a lot of panels we see in a lot of other towns actually are a bit higher than that normally, especially the ones that track, that can start flat and then tilt up. Those get closer to like 18 to
And
20
these
feet
won't do
typically.
that.
Excuse me?
These won't do that.
No, these ones stay stationary.
Sure, I'll have more as time goes on, but that's all I have for now.
How about you, Al?
No, I'm all set for now.
Wes, any comments?
Thanks, yes. So Labella Associates, this project was referred to us for review. I think initially it was anticipated that this project would be on the late March agenda. So we don't yet have our comments on this project, but you will be getting a comment letter at some point in the not too distant future. We'll have a number of comments regarding everything that we've talked about tonight, probably as well as the decommissioning plan and the associated costs with the decommissioning plan. So but based on first glance through this submission, I've reviewed solar projects in other communities, and this project was put together. The information that you provided is seems very complete. There may be some deficiencies in certain areas of the application, but it's a nice submission compared to some of the other projects that I've seen around the state. So with that, just stay tuned for Labella's comments. For the planning board's consideration, we have drafted a resolution that the planning board may want to consider to begin the lead agency coordination process. This project would be a type 1 action. The EAF indicates that they're going to disturb around 23 acres, and that exceeds the 10-acre threshold in seeker. So this would also preliminarily classify the action as type 1. So that's all I've got.
Very good. And this is a public hearing, so if anybody from the public would like to come up and ask a question or comment, just if you would please, name and address, sir, for the record.
Yes, James Gray, 8016 Main Street, Fishers. You had another diagram up. I was wondering if you could go back to that. I didn't see the other one. Can you go back? It's tough to say anyways. Any one of the yeah, right here is fine. Okay, we are right here. We are house number 9 that has glare issues listed with their assumed 30-degree fixed angle on these panels. Between April and September, we're going to be exposed to over 101 hours of glare. A large portion of that being yellow. Don't know how that's exactly defined, but we're not really interested in it. The other thing, he mentioned it was only a couple of minutes a day. I don't know how that adds up over 4 months, but it doesn't. The other thing he mentioned, that this field here is draining down this way towards this driveway. I'm not sure where or how he's seeing that, because I don't know of any drainage creeks going down that way. I have this field draining onto my property right in this area, and I'm very concerned about compaction and heavy equipment coming up there and worsening this. Those are my biggest concerns. Obviously, the glare is really unacceptable. I mean, we're supposed to go outside and wear super polarized sunglasses, I mean, it's not really fair. That's my biggest concern at this point. And I don't know how accurate the study is, to be honest with you.
So thank you. Yeah, we've noted them, and we'll be talking about this more at the April meeting, so.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Tracy Gray, 8016 Main Street, Fishers. That was my husband. I have a few other issues. The noise. I live up there where the wildlife is, and I bought that house for a reason 22 years ago. I'm not interested in a low hum. I'm interested in looking at the deer run through. I'm also very concerned about the drainage, because it is an incredible amount of water that flows off that field down our stone dirt driveway that we have to replace every year. So if there is an environmental impact with drainage, that is a concern to us. I'm also not interested in 2 or 1 year, however long it's going to take, to install a fence at 32 acres of panels that stand 12 feet in the air, wildlife impacted, the noise from it, the dirt, the dust, and anything else that's going to go on. Also, even though it can be wet up in that area, and it usually is because it floods into our property, we have had summers that are extremely dry. I am concerned because there is so much thick brush up there, which also backs up to the thruway where there's quite a forest. I am concerned about fire. If these things are pointing in a certain direction towards our house, which you can see where our house is, I don't want my backyard on fire and my house to burn down. That's the other issue. And quite frankly, would also rezone this, and I'm not interested in having that rezoned. And I'd like to know what it's going to do to the depreciation value of my home that I've been in over 20 years. So these are real concerns. Also, we have a lot of folks in the area that are on well. I'd like to know what that's going to do to their water as this stuff drains off into Irondequoit Creek. Has anybody thought about that, or the wildlife? And there's also across the street, there's a farm. There's a back corner, who's this pointer? Okay, let's see here. Right back in here, there's a farm and a gully. And if you're saying it's draining under 490, there's a farm on the other side of that. Also, these farms have a history of someone buys them, they set them up. I understand maybe the land's being leased or bought, I don't know which one. But they set them up, then they get sold. And then they break, and who does the cleanup? And now your neighborhood in this area is impacted. So these are my concern. And we've been living here, and again, I'm not, if you put a housing tract up there, I can't, it is what it is, it's a housing tract. This is concerning to me, and I'm all for progress and solar, but you're putting it into an area, into a neighborhood where there is established residencies for a very long period of time, and wildlife. So that maybe ought to be thought of.
Thank you.
Yep.
To the punch. Thanks. Bill Smith, 8010 Main Street, Fishers. I live next door to the Grays, except I'm down lower. And I've got a couple of questions and one main concern, that again being the runoff. The area is always super saturated unless it's, as Tracy was saying, in the middle of the summer and it's bone dry. A lot of water comes down off that hill. It's my pond that's right in the bottom corner. I can't seem to make that.
There you go.
Okay, there's my pond. And as Jim was saying, water will come right down across his property, and it comes right onto mine. And my big concern is with the detention pond that's planned for up here with a slower release of water, is there any research been done on what the level of runoff may be? Will it discontinue coming this direction and be directed as was indicated down this way? That's one question I have for whomever might be able to answer it.
Would you just speak up just a little bit more? Just when I do the recording, it might be hard to get all your words, just a
Sure.
little bit.
Sure,
Thank you.
I'm sorry. My question was, will the level of runoff from the solar farm area be redirected towards the west and then down the swale that's alongside the access road, as opposed to coming diagonally to the east, the way it does now? And just to show my non-IT brain, do solar farms have any impact on Wi-Fi? It's already horrible there, so. So if it's gonna get worse, that's not good. And, yeah, I'm real concerned about property values. There's a lot of nice homes around there with a lot of folks that have been there for a long time, and we went there because of the rural nature of it. That's not rural. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Ray Sittler, 8020 Main Street, Fishers. Same problem as everybody else has is the drainage. We live, if I can get this working, I'll show you, and we've been there for 50 years.
Look right
Well,
at
you're
it.
going to have to take my word for it.
Oh, you're on the ceiling.
Got it. Well, there we go, right there is where we live. Right, Main Street, Fishers, and Jake and Tracy's driveway. Great majority of the water that they're talking about ends up in our backyard now, and it's always been that way. So I can't imagine any more water than what we already have. And our house is built up, and it was built up for that reason. It's always been wet and soggy in that area. So when we built the house, we built it up for that reason. And the Smiths next door did the exact same thing because it's wet in there. So we can't handle any more water. I don't care where it comes from, but we can't handle any more. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Larry Caffarelli. I live next door to Ray and Tracy, I'm at 8026 Main Street, Fishers. The driveway right now borders the west of my land right here. This is my home right here. We are on both sides of the road. As people who haven't been around here a long time, there was no road there at one time, and our property used to extend all the way to the creek. When the road was put in 58 through eminent domain, it caused a flooding problem on our property. I wasn't there, but I have previous documentation of that. When the road bed was put in, it was higher than the natural elevation because all the runoff from the higher elevations would run all the way down naturally to the creek, which is over here. I've been on this road for over 40 years. I used to live up here in Mendon on the same road. So I know the area pretty well. My concern is that when they tried to put a housing development up in the same area back in 86, I think it was, High Meadows or something to that effect. I've got records on it at home. It caused a real severe drainage problem to my property because this new access driveway, which is going to be used for a solar farm, completely with a raised bed of the road, the elevation of that, because this is you can't see it, the topography here, but this is a substantial hill right here. And so that boxed in the west side of the swimming pool. The roadbed took care of the south side, and it used to get extreme flooding in that. Not while I've owned the property, because the town was cooperative in that when they tried to develop that, and they rectified that situation. The Clickgores, the previous owner, had a real fight on her hands to get that remediated, but it was done. And right now, we don't have much of a problem, other than in heavy rains, my yard still gets flooded, goes over, and I share that water with Ray next door. And we've put up a little temporary landscape dam there, which seemed to have helped in the last few years. But I was surprised at the extent of how this marker here at the road encroached. The driveway access is actually 81 feet, which I never knew was that because it's half that right now, the way it's developed. That when the surveyor came representing Norbert, they put a stake that encroached on my land quite a bit in relative terms. And that would be a question that I would want to ask the engineering firm. They plan on widening that, encroaching on that, and changing the slope, which would really dramatically affect that west side of my property. Also, the drainage, if you're relying on that as a drain runoff, well, it's going to come right down into our land. And I was also wondering about, is there going to be a gate when the construction is finished? Will there be a gate there to prevent public vehicles from going up and using that driveway? Because right now we just get the present owner lives right here, and he's got a horse barn there, and so all we really get is his traffic on his four-wheeler. That's it. I realized during construction there was going to be a reasonable amount of traffic, which could be tolerated, but I'm really concerned about future traffic on that roadway. Any way any public cars or vehicles can go up there, and also obviously, which has been stated many times, is the drainage issue. Thank you. I know I went a little long.
Everybody else?
My name is Adam Brunner. I'm at 137 Tennyson Way. I'm basically to the west of the property here. I have several hundred feet sharing the property line with there, which I know There's some discrepancy on where that line is that's in the proposal that we can address. My main issue is kind of the view shed and glare analysis. Number one, if you look at the view shed analysis on page 7, it shows kind of green where there's vegetation. There's no vegetation in sections between my backyard and the property line. And then it goes maybe 3 to 10 feet wide. And if they clear cut to the line as they propose, I'm gonna look out my backyard, and all of our bedrooms are on the second story of the house that overlook kind of the entire project. And my property was not included in any of the glare study, despite being next door and, you know, overlooking the entire property. I think the setback is generally, the purpose of that is to kind of preserve view shed, things like that. They propose basically clear cutting all the way there. He talked about maybe some plantings down here. The proposal calls for nothing to kind of fix the view shed issue on my several hundred feet of frontage. We're gonna sit in our dining room, kitchen, bedroom, backyard, and overlook, you know, 1,000 foot of 8-high-foot fence, and then solar panels and things like that. So that's my, you know, my main issue is kind of setback, visibility, fact that we were left out of the glare study completely.
Very good, thank you.
Yep.
I noticed that, do we have another comment, sir?
I'll be quick.
Okay.
All right, Matthew Ray, I'll just go on the record, I'm here representing Tom Golisano's property. I guess 2 comments is just one, it was surprising that we sit right next to the project, and because of the rules that we're technically in a different jurisdiction, we didn't get notified. So, on the record for that. But number 2, similar to what Adam was saying, it's not totally clear relative to that 25-foot buffer, relative to whether or not that will be cleared, if it'll get left. Adam and I were standing in there earlier today, I was walking Tom's property line and his, and it's dead. I mean, there's no greenery, there's no nothing. So, especially this time of year, you'd stare right into it. Those chain link fence is not gonna do anything. So, on the record, repeating that. Also, if any of the waterway is changed so that it takes it away from the individuals who are concerned about the water, Tom's property has significant flooding issues. So any additional water running that way isn't going to be good. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Just to clarify, a postcard did go out to Galisano's. I'm not sure if that's the right address, but it's whatever.
We got it just the other day.
Okay, because Mendon did ask me too, so.
Steve Goodwill, and I live on 7266 Rawson Road. I know you guys will handle everything they should be. The only I see, because my dumb adage, I have to look at things different than other people do, you talk about fire. Up to the middle of that, there is no way for the fire department to get to the other end of it. The access, that's all I'm looking at, is the access for it. That's just a thought, because it's inevitable. There will be a brush fire there someday. There very possibly could be. The throughway's there. You could throw a cigarette butt out or something like that. You've all seen it. I know you guys are smart enough to handle most everything else, but that's just something I saw, and I thought I'd pass on to you. So, thank you very much.
thank you. I'd like to close the public hearing.
Leave it open.
Leave it open?
Leave the public hearing open.
So we'll leave the public hearing open. So thank you for your comments. I noticed both the town engineer and the applicant making notes. And again, appreciate the input. The purpose of this particular session is to resolve to establish the town of Victor as the lead agency. And before we move into the actual application process. So I think your comments are well received and noted, and I think will be useful as we start the actual application process for this project. Having said that, I do have a draft resolution. It's a seeker resolution for the Norbert Soul Farm, dated today's date 3/12/2024 on Main Street, Fishers, application number 02 SP 2024-01 SU 2024. Whereas, on or about February 20th, 2024, the Secretary of the Town of Victor Planning Board, the Planning Board received a special use permit application and a site plan application entitled Norbert Solar Farm. The application proposed at 00. What's the address on Main Street?
Well, right now, all we have is 00.
Okay.
Yep.
Main Street, Fishers, Victor, New York, and whereas it's the intent of NSF Victor Site 1 LLC and Fishers Hollow LLC, the applicant, to develop 4.428 MWAC solar energy facility on 34.93 acre parcel of undeveloped forest and meadowland located on the north side of Main Street Fishers, adjacent to the municipal boundary of the town of Victor, Ontario County, and the town of Mendon, Monroe County, as more fully described within the material submitted to the planning board for review, including but not limited to the February 20th, 24 letter of intent from Norbit Solar Farms. Application forms, site plan drawings prepared by BME Associates dated February 20th, 2024, engineer's report prepared by BME Associates dated February 16th, 2024, and stormwater pollution prevention plan prepared by BME Associates dated February 24. The project, and whereas Part 1 of the full environmental assessment form, the EAF, completed by the applicant identifies that the project would disturb approximately 23.3 acres, the planning board finds that the project would be classified as a type 1 actions under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQR, pursuant to the following section of SEQR's implementing regulations, to wit, section 617.4, paragraph B6I, a project or action that involves a physical alteration of 10 acres. Whereas the planning board as an involved agency has identified the following additional involved agencies and associated approvals/decisions for which lead agency coordination must be conducted. The New York State DEC, the Ontario County DPW, New York State Department of Health, NYSERDA, Ontario County IDA, Ontario County Planning Board, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Whereas the Town of Victor Planning Board intends to proceed with coordinated review as required for Type 1 actions, and a lead agency must be established prior to making a determination of significance. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Planning Board confirms that the project be preliminarily classified as a Type 1 action pursuant to SEQR regulations, and be it further resolved that the Town of Victor Planning Board declares its intent to act as lead agency and directs the Planning Board Secretary to mail the EAF with Part 1 completed by the project sponsor and a copy of the site plan application to all identified involved and interested agencies, notifying them that a lead agency must be agreed upon within 30 calendar days of the date of the environmental assessment form was mailed to them expressing the Town Planning Board's intent to act as lead agency. Notification will be sent to the New York State DEC, Ontario County DPW, New York State Department of Health, NYSERDA, Ontario County IDA, Ontario County Planning Board, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The Town of Victor Town Board, Town of Mendon, New York State Thruway Authority, and the New York State Historic Preservation Office will also be notified as interested agencies. Can I have a motion to approve?
Move. I'll second.
Al and Ernie second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 4-0 in favor. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for your comments, your input.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good, how are you?
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate your filling in. So the next application before the board, 7200 Rawson Road, minor subdivision. This is a public hearing. The applicant's requesting approval to subdivide 18.5 acres. Folks, could you take it outside, please? Thank you. Sorry, let me finish this. Subdivide 18.5 acres from the 22.5 acre tax parcel 27.00-1-28.000 with remaining 4 acres to consist of the existing light industrial building and parking. Evening.
Good evening, I'm Ryan Destro. I'm from BME Associates. Here with me tonight representing the applicant Rawson Community LLC is Jim Barbado. As mentioned, we are here for a minor subdivision application. This is a 2-lot subdivision of the existing parcel located at 7200 Rawson Road. The existing parcel is 23.7 acres total, and out of that 23.7 acres, 22 and a half acres are located within the town of Victor, and the remaining 1.2 acres are located in the village of Victor. Out of the 22 and a half acres located in the town, 18 and a half acres are proposed to be subdivided out for the applicant to close on the proposed lot number 1, which is the western parcel on the map to my left. This lot number 1 is reserved for the future PDD residential development on that property. The remaining lands will be on lot 2. Lot 2 will contain 4 acres within the town of Victor, as well as 1.2 acres in the village of Victor, all within one lot. This lot will be retained by the current owner of the property, which is 7200 Rawson Road LLC. And Lot 2 will include the existing light industrial building as well as the associated parking, all on the one remaining parcel. This application is consistent with the PDD application approved by the town board in December of 2023, as the residential development will be on the 18.5 acre parcel located in the western portion of the property. It is important to note that with this application, no improvements or changes are proposed with this application, or no improvements to the property. And last week, we did present this application to the Conservation Board. They had no concerns with the 2-lot subdivision, and subsequently, they issued a resolution for approval of, a recommendation for approval of the 2-lot subdivision. So with that being said, I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
So before we get into questions, Susie, could you go back to the aerial view, please, that was shown? There you go. I just wanted to point out that I think it's inaccurate because that line right there is the town line, but the additional village line is also part of this parcel, correct?
That is correct. That is just showing strictly what is within the town of Victor itself.
But the lot itself, the tax, not the tax map, but the deed shows it including the portion that's in the village.
You are correct, and that is shown on the subdivision plat
Okay.
that was submitted with this application, the black and white drawing.
So I just want to say that this is kind of an inaccurate representation of the lot that's before us as a board. I just noticed this, seeing it up on the screen. So I don't know if, Wes, you have any comments on it, but the point is, that they're two different tax maps, but it is one lot. So, because one's in the, part of it's in the village and part of it's in the town. Just wanted to make sure that was clear to everyone that's viewing this. So, Susie, you can go back to the other plan. Thank you. And so, questions from the board. Joe?
So to be clear, again, this is just a second, if you will, procedural issue that we're facing tonight, right? To affect a subdivision, to remove the industrial from the residential portion of the property.
Correct. It's part of the PDD was assuming, stating that the light industrial parcel is a standalone parcel in terms of what can be done with it. The zoning on the residential portion of it is just that. And this helps divorce the two so that that lot 1 can go ahead and be sold, I think.
Correct.
From the balance of it. And
Does the removal of 5 odd acres from the site have an impact on the green space requirements that would be in place for Lot 1? Does it change the calculation?
I think it was considered with the PDD application and, by the town board, but maybe Wes, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. I don't think that it changes the green space requirements. As Joe Logan had said, I would look back to the PDD regulations and how those described the green space requirements. And I think it was anticipated when this was in front of the town board that these would be separate parcels.
Okay.
Right? So it's not as if this minor subdivision creates a non-conformity with regard to green space requirements, open space requirements. And just for the record, that the existing zoning on this entire area within the town is PDD. It is a planned development district. The zoning has not changed. So when we hear somebody say, the light industrial side of the project, we're not referring to referring to a light industrial zoning district. We're referring to a use, the property, the use of the property, not the zoning. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Wes, if I misspoke on that. Al?
I guess just to build on that, does the carved out lot to the right then meet green space requirements as a standalone lot?
Interesting, good question, but I believe that the reason that it's being parceled out is backed by the PDD zone, how the town board looked at it and assessed it. I don't know if the green space for the remaining parcel
So to
is
that point, though, the town board approved the rezoning to a PDD,
correct.
right? Beyond that, though, wouldn't site plan requirements then apply, or?
So the green space requirements, we wouldn't be looking toward the green space or open space requirements for the light industrial district or commercial light industrial. We'd be looking for the PDD requirements.
Right.
And those, I could double check, but I think that the intent is for this subdivision to comply with the green space and open space requirements. I don't know if the applicant has anything they want to add to
I would
this.
just like to state for the record, on the PDD application, we did include the green space proposed for both the residential portion, the 18.5 acres, as well as the remaining 4 acres for the light industrial parcel, and then we did show on the plans how they both complied with the green space and open space requirements of the town of Victor.
I'll see if I can bring up the preliminary development plan that was approved as part of the PDD, and that may help us clarify.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Wes, but even if you separate these two pieces, if you have a different owner between the two parcels, it's still a planned development district for the entire lot, even though it's been
Correct.
subdivided.
Correct.
So I think in that regard, the PDD satisfied the green space requirements. It's just that now it's being subdivided in a minor subdivision to allow the light industrial to be used as such, as on its
I'm
own.
just trying to make sure, right?
No, I appreciate that,
I'll
yeah.
call it somewhat arbitrary
Yeah.
lot line doesn't then preclude the achievement of the green space
Right,
objectives.
but the green space objectives, I think Wes may find this when he gets to the information, but the entire parcel, the PDD, satisfies it. And no matter where that line, you could take that line and move it halfway across the lot and have way more on one and less on another and still satisfy it because of the PDD zoning, not the subdivision, if you will.
Okay.
So, and you'll correct me, I'm sure, Wes, if you find something otherwise, but I think that's the explanation. It fits. So, anything else, Al?
No, that's it.
Okay. Ernie?
This is a very familiar project, so I don't really have any questions at this point.
Okay, make sure you're close enough to the mic so that they can hear you.
No, this is just a preliminary thing. It's not an approval of the project, it's just this splitting into two parcels.
And to be clear, anything that comes before us for one parcel or the other still gets a rigorous review by this board. So if there's a change at all in the requested for the light industrial side that wouldn't fit, we would certainly have a say in that. So I'll leave it at that. It's a light industrial site or light industrial use on a planned development district. So, all right?
I agree, I have no issues.
Okay. As do I, but it is a public hearing. I wanted to leave the floor open in case there was someone here that had a question for the board or the applicant. Okay?
Good evening, everyone. Dave Nankin from Chaucer Court on the Drumlins. I'm not speaking for anybody but myself, but this has come before the town board a number of times. It's come before you people, I think twice. And last week I went to the Conservation Board, and you know something? I don't know anything more now about this piece of property, these 5 acres than I did from the very start. And I just want to say, why the secrecy? There were so many questions, so many people came here at your first meeting, and it's somehow it's been, what's going to happen to that building has never really been properly answered. And I don't understand the secrecy.
So the secrecy you're referring to is not our process, but the applicant's potential use of that
Exactly.
parcel? Okay, I just want to make sure that's clear. Dan.
That's all I have.
And I
to say.
appreciate that you have been here for every meeting on this one, and then some. So I understand that you know what you've been able to take in. So, you know.
And if not for Wes's explanation, which was excellent, you know, to understand that, yeah, it's a PDD, but it still has to abide by the rules and regulations of of a light industrial piece of property. I mean, I wouldn't know what's going on.
Okay.
I
All
just
right.
wanted to make a statement. Thank you.
It's a
Thank you
good
all.
question, and the applicant certainly is free to jump in and address it as you can.
Jim Barbado. I think just referring to the light industrial portion of the project is the question.
Yes.
And we've had communication, I believe we sent an email in from the current owner that they have a current tenant that's leasing the property, and they continue to, I think it runs for a number of years, 3 or 5 more years, and they plan to continue the same use that they've been with that tenant that's there in place now. So there's no secrecy to it. There's really nothing changing on that, other than it's a tenant that doesn't have, I don't think they have a real active use. I've driven by and it looks pretty quiet, but it's a tenant that's paying rent and plans to continue to pay rent.
Okay, so
So
as far as secrecy is concerned, it's more of a hearing you say, we don't intend to do anything differently with the site, but now you're verifying that, I'm going to paraphrase, that the use will remain the same as far as you can tell.
Yeah.
You've got a good tenant, you're going to continue to use.
Yeah, I'm not the owner, but the owner has a tenant with a lease that plans to continue to lease the property at least till the end of the term, and there's no changes to that portion of the property. So there's no secrecy to it. It's just going to remain like it's been.
Okay, well, I appreciate the clarification.
Sure,
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Anyone else with questions from the public? All right, this is a minor subdivision application. I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing for that subdivision.
I'll move.
Al moves.
Second.
Ernie seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, public hearing is closed, 5-0. And Wes, anything else you'd like to add before we move on to motion here?
I'm just calculating the open space, the green space on this parcel based on the PDD map. If you give me just a minute, I'll get these
Sure.
numbers for you. So.
While you're doing that, I did have one other question, and that is, or comment. And I believe that the remaining parcel, and I'll call that Lot 2, since it's split between the village and the town, we really don't have any significant say in the village piece if it was separated off, but your deed says it's a one contiguous parcel, correct?
Correct. You would have control over that, because if they were ever to break out the parking lot, like you would say, the subdivision application will come before this board, so
Right.
you would have control over that. And you also have control over any changes in use over that as part of the PDD approval for the property as well.
Okay, so my concern has been, as you know, that what could happen with that building sometime in the future may require the applicant, if they want to change the use, change the tenancy, which requires more parking or whatever, to look to modify the site, which clearly we have the ability to review and approve or disapprove. What I don't feel should be, not the right wording, but should be allowed. I think what we should do is qualify this subdivision with a statement going forward that those two parcels, village and town parcels that remain, should always remain one parcel and not have the ability to be subdivided, whether on the lot line of the village and town or otherwise. Because it's such a large building on a relatively small footprint, unless you demolish the building, and redo something with the entire lot, there's no opportunity to add to the site. And if you cut a parcel off that's in the village to add it to some other lot near, adjacent, now you're even less property to work with on that building. So I don't think the intent ever was to do that, but I'm concerned that it could come up even 10 years from now.
And again, this board would have control over any subdivision within that parcel. So you would have the ability to approve or deny it at that time.
All right.
All right, Wes has got some
So,
information.
just based on calculation with the PDD and also kind of confirmed with the aerial imagery, the parcel being created, or where that existing light industrial building is, has approximately 52% open space / green space.
Okay.
So, and I think in the light industrial district, if this were zoned light industrial, which it is not, I think the open space requirement is 35%. So
Yes.
this definitely exceeds that.
So that's great, that we have that flexibility with the site. So Al, maybe that answers your question on green space?
The math is fine. I guess, again, I'll just take a position that says, right, if for some reason there's not enough green space being proposed on the other lot, the larger lot, that could have somehow been accommodated by taking some of this excess green space.
Oh, so if they run into, they're 45% on the
limit.
other lot.
Right, it may limit the
Yeah.
development on the larger parcel.
Yeah, and I don't know, Wes, if you've calculated the other
So-
half of this.
So the PDD, the approved PDD, preliminary development plan, actually shows that there's 70, in the open space / green space, there's 76% in the residential portion.
Okay.
So, yes, subdividing it, both sides will have satisfied their
Independent.
normally zoned
Yep.
uses. So light industrial, 35% is well satisfied, and then the residential, 50% is well satisfied on the other side. So, thank you, Wes. So, any other questions or comments, Wes, did you have?
No, not unless you want me to get into a little bit of the resolution and the seeker.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
has a question.
Well, I did close a public hearing. Is there something you'd like to? Come on up. If there's something that's not clear to you, we'll be glad to try to answer that.
Marcia Sengus, 1231 Wellington. I just had wanted to get a clarification from Mr. Barbado, maybe. It's my understanding, can't talk and look, it's my understanding that the warehouse is being leased. I mean, and there are two parts to this building. There's the warehouse, and then there's a whole left section that's the office space. And based on the parking and the traffic and whatever, I understood that only the warehouse is being leased currently, and perhaps that's the lease that would continue, but I don't know, maybe you could clarify for me, whether the office space is being used at all. I haven't seen, or we haven't seen any activity there. So that's why I'm trying to understand the lease.
I don't have any details to their.
Come on up, sorry. Yeah, you're looking more at the other parcel, I
Yeah,
assume?
yeah, I don't have any details to the lease or that use there. I wasn't aware of, I don't know any of the structure of how much of it's leased, but I know they have a current tenant.
There is a tenant for the warehouse. I knew that. And the tenant has been phenomenal. We hardly ever see any traffic or anything, but there's a whole section on the left that would make for a lovely office space, but I don't know that that's being
Yeah, I don't know
currently
any of their
leased.
plans.
Just a clarification.
Yeah, and I would assume that the building owner would have every right to try to fill it with additional tenants.
I've been trying to for
Yeah,
many
so
years.
I guess, go ahead.
I don't know that there's, I don't know that the current person leasing it isn't occupying the entire space with their lease, because it looks like they're using so little of the space, just based on the traffic that you see, that I'm not sure
Right, there's no parking.
what's happening.
Nobody's
Yeah,
there.
I asked the question of the owner, is it leased? And he said, yeah, they're paying rent. So
Maybe we could just find out.
it's a great neighbor. quiet.
It would be helpful if maybe somebody could just check. That was just I mean, not that it's going to affect this tonight, but it would be nice to know, I think, that information.
Sure, and I would assume that if they did find a tenant that had made the use of that building more intense and they needed to make any modifications that went beyond what's at the site, they'd have to come before the board to talk to us.
I know last summer, a lot of time and energies were put forth, totally redoing the roof. A lot of work has been done on the building, and I wouldn't think you would do all that just for a warehouse, but of course it would depend on what's inside of it too. But I was just trying to get a better feel for the tenant.
Sounds like they're being proactive with maintaining their structure so they can continue
Would
to
be.
keep it viable.
Yep, thank
So,
you.
okay.
Thanks for letting me speak.
You're welcome, Marcia. So, okay, go ahead, Wes.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to talk a little bit about seeker here. The planning board will need to choose whether or not to undertake a segmented seeker review of this minor subdivision application. And that decision to segment a review is the discretion of the lead agency. So there isn't anybody else that tells you whether or not you want to segment the seeker review, right? So, but if you do segment a seeker review, it's got to be supported by documentation that justifies or rationale that justifies the decision, right? So in LaBella's letter from March 5th, we had 3 comments. One was we wanted the applicant to verify the property line location. My guess is that it's fine. And then the signature block, we just asked for a signature line for the town engineer. And then I elaborated a little bit about seeker. So generally, seeker doesn't want you to segment the review, right? And what I'm talking about segmentation is you're looking at the environmental review of this minor subdivision, and we know or we anticipate that the applicant may come forward with a site plan or subdivision application for the remainder of the residential portion of the project. Seeker is permissible in certain circumstances. For example, when
You mean segmentation is permissible?
yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You're right.
Just want to make sure I'm clear.
Segmentation of seeker is permissible. It's not always recommended. But for example, in this particular project, this minor subdivision appears to be functionally independent from any future plans of development, meaning that the impact of this minor subdivision, or this minor subdivision, is not going to have an impact on anything further going down the road. And you are not tying yourselves, you are, as a planning board, would not be committing yourselves to approving any future development as if you were to approve this minor subdivision application. So, as the applicant stated, right, this subdivision application would result in the creation and configuration of one new tax parcel, right? And there's no development that is associated with this proposed application that's in front of you tonight. And again, the approval of this minor subdivision does not commit the planning board to approve any future site plan or subdivision applications associated with the 7200 Rawson Road PDD. And so it's not going to result in piecemeal development. One parcel would continue to contain the pre-existing warehouse building. No modifications are planned as part of this action. And regarding the impacts of the action being considered for segmentation, the subdivision being considered now, any potential future proposal for development does not share a common impact if these activities were to be reviewed as a single project, nor would the segmented activities share a common impact that would result in a potentially significant adverse impact, even if the impacts of single activities are not necessarily significant by themselves. So as part of this draft resolution that you have in front of you tonight, there's a little bit of elaboration and articulation of these points, because you need to find that, you know, the segmentation is no less protective of the environment than if you did it in a non-segmented fashion. So that's what I wanted to say about seeker.
Okay.
If you have questions.
Yeah. Anything for Wes?
I guess when I listen to you speak about it, it begs the question in my mind, excuse me, if we didn't do this and we let it just go and complete with the total project, what's motivating this to happen right now? And maybe that's a question for the applicant. I mean, you could do this at the end of the approval process, right? Why would you do it now versus later?
Yep.
In our purchase contract of the property, we had 1 year to get approvals. We anticipated that we'd be able to get through the process in a year, but we've gone well beyond that year. So instead of making the current owner wait another 3, 4, 5, 6 months, we just wanted to move forward with a quicker step of subdividing the two so we can close on the portion of land that we're purchasing and move forward and not drag them along waiting for us to close on our contract.
Okay.
So it's just really timing.
Okay.
And frankly, as we review both of them independently, they both have, in our minds, at least separate zoning. So we'll be looking at them with critical eye from both perspectives. So
Okay.
I think we'll actually be more thorough as we go through both independent. So, anybody else? Ernie, questions?
Nope.
Al, Joe? Okay. Unless you have anything else, I'm going to go ahead and read this resolution. And as Wes said, there is some language in here regarding seeker. So, application 1MS 2024, whereas the planning board made the following findings of fact. An application was received February 6, 2024 by Rosslyn Community LLC, the applicant by the Secretary of the Planning Board for a minor subdivision entitled 7200 Rosslyn Road Minor Subdivision, where it is the intent of the applicant to subdivide a 22.5 acre parcel into 2 lots. Lot 1 would consist of 18.537 acres, and Lot 2 would consist of 4 acres containing the existing warehouse, the project. There are 9 whereases. So whereas the Town of Victor Planning Board considered whether to segment the seeker review of the minor subdivision application as opposed to a non-segmented review, and limited circumstances exist for which a segmented review may be justified, and whereas the planning board finds that the proposed minor subdivision is functionally independent from the overall proposed 7200 Rosslyn Road PDD development, in that minor subdivision would create a single new tax parcel that delineates the 2 discernible sections of the PDD, including the residential use component of the project referred to as the westerly section, and the light industrial and commercial use referred to as the easterly section, consistent with the site layout of the adopted preliminary development plan for the PDD, and whereas the creation of the new tax parcel is functionally independent of any future plans to develop the westerly section residential portion of the PDD, and an approval of the minor subdivision does not commit the planning board to approve any future site plan or subdivision applications associated with the 7200 Rosslyn Road PDD. And the minor subdivision would not result in piecemeal development because no development is proposed or would occur with said minor subdivision application, and whereas the proposed minor subdivision and any potential future proposal for development do not share a common impact that would result in a potentially significant adverse impact, even if the impacts of single activities are not necessarily significant by themselves. And whereas the planning board reviewed the unlisted action on March 12, 2024, and identified no significant impacts, now therefore be it resolved that a segmented seeker review of the minor subdivision application is no less protective of the environment than if the minor subdivision were to be considered in a non-segmented manner with development plans for the westerly section of the PDD, and that the project 7200 Rosslyn Road minor subdivision will not have a significant adverse impact on the environment, and the planning board hereby issues a negative declaration, and be it further resolved that the application of Rosslyn Community LLC minor subdivision entitled 7200 Rosslyn Road minor subdivision, drawn by BME Associates dated February 2024, received by the planning board February 6, 2024, planning board application number 1MS 2024 be approved, excuse me, with the following conditions. Conditions that must be met prior to chairman signing the minor subdivision plan. Number 1, that no final signatures will be given on the plans until all legal and engineering fees have been paid as per fee reimbursement local law adopted November 25th, 1996. Number 2, that before the planning board chairman signs the approved film originals, the developer should submit 2 copies of electronic files to the town. Copies shall be forwarded to the town engineer's office to confirm that the data on the electronic files are the same as the approved subdivision plans. Number 3, that the Section 4 standard approval conditions for all subdivisions, major and minor, in the design and construction standards be met. Number 4, that the comments in the letter dated March 5th, 2024 from Labella Associates be addressed. Conditions that are ongoing, standard conditions that must be adhered to. Number 1, that the minor subdivision comply with the Town of Victor design and construction standards for land development, including Section 4. Number 2, that approved subdivision maps, including conservation easements, lot consolidations, and lot line adjustments, shall be submitted in digital format, AutoCAD 2002 or latest version, effective January 1st, 2004, as per Town Board Resolution 193 of June 23rd, 2003. Number 3, that should any underground water conditions be encountered during construction, the developers to address the encroachment and impact to the underground stream to the satisfaction of the town engineer, and be it further resolved that the planning board secretary distribute the planning board's approval letter. Before we vote, anybody else have any comments or concerns? I brought up a condition that I'd suggested about ensuring that the 2 village and town parcels, tax parcels, would remain as a single deed, not have the ability to be subdivided because of this PDD. Does anyone feel differently, or would they not think it's appropriate or necessary?
No.
I'm seeing a no, it's not necessary. Is that what I'm hearing?
Because I think it'd have to come back before the board.
Okay,
I'm not sure we could make that requirement, but I understand where you're coming from.
okay, all right, so no. All right. So with that, and no modifications to what I just read, I hear a motion for approval of the resolution.
Move.
Ernie moves. Joe seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Carried 5-0.
Great, thank you for your time.
Property will be subdivided. Our last application is a sketch application. It's not a public hearing. Highline Park subdivision. Applicant is requesting acknowledgement of a complete application to develop under the clustering provisions for 26 for sale townhome lots, 1 HOA lot and 1 lot consisting of 3 apartment buildings. This is the first step of a major subdivision, and only acknowledgement of a completed application will be considered at this meeting. Good evening.
Good evening, Rich Teedy. It's been a while since I've been in to present to you. I am now with Morel Builders. I've got Bill Areno with me tonight to discuss this application. So, a couple years ago, we had the site plan approval for the PDD Highline Park site. As we've gone through the last couple of years, there have been a lot of things economically that have happened, from supply chain issues affecting prices of materials to labor shortages to interest rate increases that have been constantly bombarding and affecting our pro forma on this project. It's really gotten to a point where as complete rental units, our pro forma really isn't working, and to be able to subdivide out the townhomes as for sale products helps us to get that pro forma to work and work through our financing to get this project completely built. So we're here with a concept plan to do that. We have no intentions of changing any of the layout of the infrastructure, changing any of the dedications, with the only exception of conversations I've had with the Water Authority. We're probably going to have to dedicate the water main going to the townhomes, which is going to move our backflow prevention for the private service to the apartments, probably up on top of the hill. So as we go through our preliminary final, that will be finalized with them, and they will obviously have an easement over their dedicated main to those townhomes. The townhomes will be surrounded by an HOA area, so it will be controlled and protected, very similar to the area of open space. that was going to be with the apartments. There will be a separate entity for the apartments. The clubhouse will be built with the apartments, but we are going to give members of the HOA rights to the clubhouse. So they will be very similar to as if they'd be rental units in there. We're coming in under the cluster provision because the typical townhome lots are very close setbacks usually to those townhome units surrounded by the HOA area, which is a little bit different than the setbacks that we have on the overall PDD lot. So we're looking for your feedback on this concept, and we would also like to make the request is, this is a little bit different than a subdivision where there's actually a site layout to go with it. That's already approved. We're in the process of starting the pad-ready construction of that, to be able to finalize this subdivision as a single-step preliminary final. With that, I'll open that up to any questions you might have on the application.
Okay, thank you. Wes, we had a discussion on dedication of roads. Are you proposing dedicated road, private road within the HOA?
Nope, the HOA will have its own private road off from the main driveway, and the main driveway and the driveway back into the apartments will be maintained by the apartment entity.
Okay.
No plans on dedicating the roads.
Standards would be to town road standards anyway, or different?
Same standards as we had approved with the PDD, which are, I believe, very close to the town standards for the private roads.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I had meant to check that, and I believe if they are not exactly to town standard, I think what they did is equivalent. I think we reviewed to be sure that they were equivalent to what the town would require.
Mhm.
There might be some modifications in, the material for the base or something, but.
My big concern is, in the past, we've had other subdivisions where private ownership was, that private ownership or HOA requested that the town take the road over dedicated to the town, and they weren't built to town standards, so.
So I know that was very close because we built the main driveways and roadways as a heavier base unit.
And that's my point, is this is quite a heavy, there's a lot of parcels on that cul-de-sac you have there, so.
And as the HOA is going to actually kind of end up at the top of that driveway, and then they will have the road there, and then they will have an easement across the entryway. I think a request for dedication in the future would be very difficult for them and the town to entertain, as there wouldn't be direct right-of-way access with
Okay.
that roadway.
That's what I had at the moment. Al, questions?
Just to refresh my memory, so these were originally intended on what we're calling Phase 1 to be rental units originally? That was what was approved, and now we're looking to...
That was our original intent. We spent some time with town staff reviewing. There was not any specific language that required them to be rentals or for sale units.
Okay. And then the shift to for sale units, does that change any of the approvals as far as now any variances required, or is everything compliant with all the zoning regulations?
So everything is compliant with the PDD zoning, as we aren't changing the layout. So the one request that we're making with this is under the cluster provision, because we had 25-foot side setbacks, which were to the side of the overall parcel, which are obviously a lot larger than what you typically have with townhome lots. So we're requesting this under the cluster provision for the town board to be able to accept and override those setback provisions for the townhome lots in this scenario, and the HOA lot as it relates to the internal line with the apartment parcel.
Okay, thank you.
I can't hear.
I clarify by what means? Cluster subdivision, okay. Wes, do you want to relate that to the public?
So my understanding is the PDD, when that was established, that created its own dimensional requirements for setbacks, right? So instead of this, I think it was a formerly light industrial parcel. So there were dimensional requirements as part of the light industrial zoning, right? And those changed due to the town board's adoption of the PDD, right? So it was anticipated that entire parcel was going to, the setbacks designed for that PDD assumed that this development was going to remain as a single parcel, right? And that's why it went to site plan review and not subdivision. So now, because the applicant would like to modify the project in a way that they can sell these units, they need to create their own individual lots. So several lots will need to be created. So the setback requirements that were established as part of the PDD would hinder the ability to create these lots. So you're using the clustering subdivision provisions, New York State Town Law, section, I think it's 278, allows for the planning board to use clustering provisions to modify the setback requirements that are part of an underlying zoning district. So in this case, the applicant would like the planning board to use those clustering provisions authorized in the New York State Town Law, so that the lots that they're creating, the boxes that they're drawing around these homes, would comply with whatever the cluster setbacks would be established by this planning board.
Who didn't allow them to cluster, would that mean
Yeah, we're not going to get any of that question on the tape.
No, I don't think that's what would happen.
Could you repeat her question?
The question was, if the planning board did not allow for the clustering, if the planning board doesn't allow for the clustering, what was the second part of that question?
Reduce the density.
Would that reduce the density? No, I would imagine that the applicant may go back to the town board and ask them to change the PDD.
So the density is set,
The density would not change.
right?
Yeah.
Right, the density is set by the PDD. I will also add to that, the concept plan that we submitted, I believe shows an outer setback requirement of 25 feet that meets the original. And so the provision that we're asking for the relief on under the cluster is just those internal for those townhomes and the HOA parcel to the apartment parcel.
Okay, Al, anything
I was
else?
just going to say, I think just to clarify, right, so tonight we're just reviewing whether or not the plat has been submitted,
Is it complete?
but we're not approving the plan.
Correct. Yes, there's no approval of that plot. We go through the process now.
So no other questions?
Okay. Al?
As well as our request to do a single-stage preliminary final.
We'll talk about that.
Yep.
Joe?
Nothing.
Nothing? Scott?
Nope.
Any?
What's that?
Okay. So you mentioned the request to combine preliminary with the sketch plan?
Preliminary and final.
Plan final. I think we need to get into this before we can answer that question. It's been a while since we've reviewed this. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks about it, but anybody have an opinion on combining them?
Are there any design changes proposed with this submission? When you submit your preliminary or preliminary final, are there any design changes compared to what was
Yes.
approved?
No, the only caveat was, as I mentioned, with the water main.
Yeah.
We're probably going to have to dedicate a portion of that water main and move the backflow preventer.
Yeah.
But our intent is for that to be essentially in the same location,
But the number of units, the size of units, the location,
all the same.
So really, we've seen a lot of this already.
right?
Though it's This application is really about those townhome and HOA lot lines
Right.
and their setbacks, as well as we go into preliminary final, we'll finalize what exactly the water authority is going to require for the water main in that
Okay,
situation.
this is why I wanted to have this conversation, to ferret that all out. So, other questions or comments about that? Scott, or Ernie? No. Okay.
Just to make sure, these are still single family.
We're not going to get any of this stuff on, and it's not, this is not a public hearing.
But if they're changing things.
Well, it's still not a public hearing right now. You'll get a chance to comment on it at the preliminary final. But we've already, there's no changes to what's already been done. So, with the exception of, as he stated, there'll be individual parcels for sale. So, thanks. I appreciate your working with us on that. So I guess
May I speak, please? Postcards that were sent out to neighbors said that this was a public hearing on this subdivision.
It was error on my part on the front, so sketch plans are never a public hearing. It did say acknowledgement of a complete application, so the preliminary, when it does come in, would be a public hearing for you guys.
So that's the time when you'll be able to actually comment on other aspects. All the engineering aspects will be out in front of us as well. This is purely a change in approach, I guess, is what we're really looking at. So,
And that being said, then it's not a public hearing, but that, given that people came in good faith thinking it was a public hearing, if you want to give a couple minutes, I wouldn't be opposed.
okay. All right, well, so before you say anything, why don't you come on up to the mic? I'll allow it, and we'll move forward. I didn't realize it was that, there was that error, but, so
I'm not here,
floor.
John. My name's Michael Beester. I'm living at 7622 County Road 42, so I'll be one of the neighbors to this subdivision. And I thought this was going to be a public hearing, so I wanted to find out more about what was going in place. And there was a second error in that the address is wrong on the postcard,
Address, your address or the site address?
the site address. So the site address on the postcard was,
7652.
on the postcard, it says 7562.
Yeah.
There was a lot of errors with the printer, so I
Okay.
thought I caught them all.
Okay.
So,
Oh, yes, it does say 7562, when it should be
Yeah.
7652.
I'm a new neighbor, and I just wanted to know sight lines, the height of the apartment complexes. I wanted to see what was going to be in my backyard now. So that's all.
So you'll certainly get a chance to see that at the next phase.
you will get another postcard, just FYI.
If there's an error, let us know.
Mr. Chairman, as long as we're talking about corrections, could I make one?
Sure, Dave.
Oh, dear.
Oh, David Wright, 33 Ketchum Street. When you put in 7652 Main Street Fishers, the tax parcel is -311, not 310, according to the county. So either the county's correct or you're
Yeah,
correct.
it comes up on our program as two different ones, because at one point they had merged two properties. So in our IPS system, it comes up a little different than the county.
Oh, okay.
So
All right.
I did have a question into the assessor to clarify.
Because I
going
tried to
forward.
look up 310 and nothing comes up, but
Yeah, they
311
merged two properties before, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Dave, thanks for bringing that forward. For anyone else, as long as we're at the floor. All right, well, the public hearing certainly will be open at the next phase. And I'd like to, unless there's an objection, we have a draft resolution that Lisa put together in case we were in agreement to do that. And it's a pretty simple one. Application 1SK 2024, Highline Park Subdivision, 7652 Main Street, Fishers. Whereas the planning board made the following findings of fact. There are 7 of them. Now therefore be it resolved that regarding the sketch plan application of Morel Builders Incorporated major subdivision entitled Highline Park Subdivision, Drawn by Marathon Engineering, dated February 6, 2024, received by the Planning Board February 26, 2024. Planning Board Application 01SK 2024. The Planning Board acknowledges receipt of a complete sketch plat application, and be it further resolved that the Planning Board Secretary forward a copy of this resolution to the applicant. Do I hear a motion for
I'll
approval?
move.
Al moves.
Second.
Ernie seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. So, moving ahead.
We don't have to have that in the resolution,
Yeah.
but we could just give them some direction.
Okay, so, for the record, the request was to make it a one-step application. I believe there was no objection on the board's behalf for that direction, so I think we'll proceed in that way. So we're not making it a formal part of the resolution, but just declaring that that's the way we'll proceed.
It would be two separate applications, like you would submit the preliminary and the finals. So we will do the preliminary and close public hearing.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. All right, anyone have any other business other than adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Joe moves.
Second.
Ernie seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Have a great week, everyone.
Great.